So today I'm going to talk about applying for PhD and receiving assistantship. My name is Nurila. I'm very happy welcoming everyone. So first, I just want to quickly share some information about me so you get to know me. I graduated from Republic Physics and Mathematics School in Almaty, commonly named FMSHAV. And I was also EducationUSA Club alumna, and that EducationUSA Club really helped me to apply for my undergrad in the States, where I received a bachelor's in material science and engineering with minor in physics from Alfred University. Alfred University is like a small private college in upstate New York near Buffalo area. If you're familiar with New York State, it's 6 hours away from New York City. So don't affiliate it with New York City. It's a very beautiful place. As you can see, I put some pictures here. So this is Alfred. I am associate member of the Saxon Circle, which is Alfred University Donor Society. So basically what it means, I'm part of the Board of Trustees as a student representative at my university. It's a great honor to be part of it. Also, I'm a first-year PhD student at University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign. This is the campus of the University of Illinois. It's very big, and this is just a small part of it. Really beautiful as well. The University of Illinois is located in Illinois State, 3 hours south from Chicago. And I'm also a huge fan of Harry Potter. Roger Federer. I played tennis for 4 years when I was undergrad and represented my university. And I'm also a huge fan of Michelle Obama and her newly written book, Becoming. Highly recommend. I guess this was from the last year's presentation, as I did it over summer, so it was easier to ask questions in the audience. Those questions are kind of basic, and why I put it here is kind of to show my flow of the presentation. If you're a senior or junior, that's the right time to apply for a PhD program, but if you're already graduated, that's also fine. Also, master's or PhD, I'm more qualified in talking about PhD program, but I also applied for master's, so I'll be covering that a little bit. And also different majors. Of course, I'm more confident in talking about sciences and engineering, as that is my major. But if you apply for a PhD, I could also talk about arts, social science, business, and education, because the process is basically very standard, no matter what major you are. So I hope you find it very useful for your future application. And there's a small joke about PhD. We always say how PhD stands for permanent head damage, because if people want to get PhD, that means they're really gonna get that. Before applying to graduate school, what you really need to consider is, first of all, your GPA. So usually minimum GPA when you apply for any graduate program is written on a lot of websites is 3.0, but it can vary depending on what school you're gonna choose. I had a GPA above 3.0. I graduated with magna cum laude, which means a GPA above a certain point. And usually it's written on your transcript and on your diploma if you graduate from the university in the States. Also, scoring well on graduate record examinations, which is a very standardized test, GRE. So my GRE scores were kind of average. So I got 169 on quantitative part. In verbal part, I got 155. And for essay, I got 4.5. That the importance of each section depends on what major you're applying to. For me, the most important section was quantitative, and I got a pretty high score at it. But if you're applying for social sciences or psychology or arts, maybe creative writing, you probably want to score higher in these sections. I also was awarded a Standing Senior Award, which is basically giving a commencement speech in my undergrad college, which is a big deal for United States, but I know it's a little different for our country. That's why I would not really care about this if you're applying from Kazakhstan. And gaining experience is really important part of your application. Basically, what I mean by gaining experience is your research experience. and maybe some teacher assistant positions, tutoring positions. Those all are important, or maybe working in industry is also a good point for your application. Also, if you're part of any scientific student organizations or any other student organizations, this is basically my profile. So that's why I put scientific student organization, but any volunteering activity, any type of communities you're part of, you can list here, but be sure to list them in the increasing importance, I would say, because you don't want to put something that is not relevant, not to waste time of any reader of your application. And also references. References are one of the most important parts of your application, I would say. So applying to graduate school. First of all, you need to do your homework. By homework, I mean choosing an area of the research you're interested in, because if you're applying for PhD specifically, you really need to narrow down what kind of research you're interested in, what scientific projects you're interested in, and what fascinates you in that area that you're applying to. Also, you need to investigate potential schools. So basically, what I mean by investigating potential schools is finding out what their deadlines are, where are they located, how many students they're accepting, what are their admission requirements. All that is very important. Also, finding specific faculty member is very important. You can find any faculty member on basically any website of the university. If you click on your department, they usually list all the faculties there. Most of the faculties have their own website of their group, and that's also very important to visit and see what their scientific publications are, what their research interests are, if they're hiring or not, how many students they have. All of that information can be found on their website. Also, contacting potential mentors. That's a little tricky part. A lot of people have problems with not hearing back from the faculty, especially if you apply for a very big school. That's a normal thing to have. Don't get discouraged by it. Usually faculties receive so many emails, and especially if it comes from an outside source, it can go to spam and stuff like that. So basically what I would advise is contacting them as much as you can, but not to be too annoying. So maybe check up every 2 months if you contact them really early, but if you contacted them kind of late, that's on you as well. Get application form and deadlines, visit the website. So when you apply to graduate school, there's no common application. There's no one application that you fill out and you send it to all the schools. Each school usually have their own website when you apply for graduate school. So that's very important to get familiarized with the website. You can create accounts as early as you can. It's very easy. You just set up an email and a password, and it's very helpful because that way you can see what parts of application will require more time for preparation. The next part is requirements. I found it very helpful to create a spreadsheet where I would put the deadline, what specific scores they're looking for, what kind of exams they want to see, because different schools may require different things. So jury is very standard, TOEFL if you're an international student, but some colleges may require jury score, subject juries, and then maybe some other parts of application that are not standard. So keeping up with all the requirements is very important. Components of the application. I talked a lot about application, and I just wanted to kind of briefly show what are the main parts of it. Statement of interest is very common. It can be named different things. It can be personal statement, it can be research statement. It has a lot of different names. So this is basically the part where you talk about your research interests, your interest in this specific university, why you chose that program, why you want to enroll into grad school, and all that stuff. So it's basically your personal statement. The second part is letters of recommendation. Some universities may require 3. That's pretty standard, but sometimes they allow you to upload up to 5 letters of recommendation. So thinking about this part is also very important because that's how admission officer is gonna be able to get to know you from a different perspective. And having a very personalized letters of recommendation is usually a very strong part of the application. So the third part is the CV or resume, which is very standard, and there are different forms and formats depending on what is the purpose of your resume or CV. Usually I would recommend having it in one page unless you have extremely important experiences that you cannot possibly list in one page, because usually resumes that are longer than one page is harder to read and harder to focus on. So basically putting here the most important experiences, that's kind of the point of the CV. And then the fourth part is academic transcript. If you need to translate them into the English with official translation, do it ahead of the time, scan it. Some universities may request you to ship it or mail it, as they say. So that's very important because mail usually gets delayed. So sending it early also is an important part of academic transcripts. Usually in the application, they allow you to upload unofficial scan of it, and then you mail it later to the university. And the fifth part is, of course, GRE scores. And usually you send GRE score through ETS website, which is the organization that basically gives out GRE tests. So doing this also ahead of the time and not forgetting to send it to your scores to all universities is very important as well. A little bit, again, back on my track, my grad school application story. I applied to, as you can see, a lot of universities. So I spent a lot of money sending all those applications, which is not necessary. I just wanted to be sure that I will get into the universities I really wanted to. So the top universities, University of Washington was my top choice. University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign was my second choice. And all those universities were kind of my third choice. And the universities at the bottom were my safe universities. So I applied for the top universities. I applied for PhD program, and for Boston University, Stevens Institute of Technology and Rutgers, I applied for masters. You can do whatever you want. There's no uniform, like, standard way that people do it. I just wanted to make sure I will get into grad school, and my final goal was PhD anyways. So getting masters along the way wasn't a bad idea. It's kind of risky to apply to so many schools because it's time consuming, and you want to really put a lot of time and effort into the application of the school you really want to get into. This is just kind of like up to you part. I actually got accepted to all of the schools listed here, but with the University of Washington, sometimes when you apply for PhD, they can put you in a master's program if they think you're not qualified to directly be in their PhD program. That's what happened to me with the University of Washington, and that's why I'm not there. My letter from HOGWARTS, as I say, looks like this. Usually in the middle of March or end of March or beginning of April, depending on the university, you will get an email, an actual letter of stating that you've been admitted or you've been declined the admission to specific graduate college. And usually they say your stipend money, all those information comes with a letter. You can also find different types of assistantship they provide on their website as well. That's how the application website looks like for my university, but different universities will have different websites as well. Talking about statement of purpose, I think it's the most terrifying and most complicated part of the application. So I kind of gave a sample, which is my personal statement. What I wanted to show is the structure. It's pretty standard. Every statement follows the same structure, basically. So as you can see, the beginning is you just want to show just a brief overview of who you are and why you are an important applicant and why you're passionate about a certain area of the research, or why you're passionate about this university or your major or anything about you that stands out. Then you basically, it's pretty standard. People talk about their experience. It can be your research experience. It can be your work experience, anything that is relevant for your application. So for me, it was research experience because I applied for engineering school. For some people, it might be their teaching experience or their work experience in the industry. So basically in this paragraph, you talk about your certain specific experience in as much as details as you can. Don't be afraid to use some technical terms, because usually those letters are forwarded to, after they given to admission officers forward it to a certain college you apply to and share it with some faculties. So faculty will definitely understand your technical terms that you're using. there. It's not limited to one paragraph. You can talk about different types of experiences, and it can be like 3, 4 different paragraphs of different types of experiences you had. The last part is usually very standard as well. You talk about something fun for the reader to actually get to know you, but also make sure that this fun also correlates to who you are in your personality. So you might talk about a great hobby of yours of solving problems, or like puzzle solving or something like that, that relates to some kind of a very important skill that usually admission officers are looking into prospective grad students. Almost last paragraph, you kind of state why you want to obtain PhD or master's, and what is your ultimate goal from getting degree, and where you want to apply it for. And that's how the certain department gets to know if your goals orient with their department goals. That's why it's so important to have some small research about the certain department you're applying to, because you want to line up your goals with their expectations from their students. And usually it's very easy to find on their website. And then the last paragraph is basically you highlight what university you're applying to and why this university is so special for you. It can be for many different reasons, but make sure to do your research again, because you don't want to be very basic, saying, oh, like I'm applying to this school because it's so great. You can state that, but then you need to explain why you think it's so great and why you think their research is so important. And then sometimes it helps to name some faculty members here, and you don't really have to know them personally or them to know you personally, but it kind of shows that you've done your research on the university. You know who you potentially can work with. So department sees that they can assign you to this research group, and you will meet certain criteria of that research group because your interests align with that, with their interests. And then, of course, usually you end your statement of purpose with appreciation for reading throughout your application, and it can be stated in very different ways, but it's pretty standard. And sometimes people like to add their email. I did. If they want to contact you, sometimes it's nice to have it right there. They have it on your applications as well, but to get it from your application, they have to go through so many different things, and it's just easier for them if it's visually here. Then letters of recommendation is a big part, and here I just showed some pictures of people who recommended me, and I just want to highlight how important it is that your recommenders know you personally really well. So I had a letter of recommendation from the president of my undergrad university, which is a very big deal, but it wasn't very standard. It was very personal. So I think what I want to highlight is having a personal letter of recommendation over the important letter of recommendation. So basically, you want your letter of recommendation state who you are and show that you personally know the professor or faculty or some person that recommends you. And it really helps if faculty from that recommends you have some affiliation with the university, I would say, or some kind of credit or creditability in the area that you're applying to. But it's not necessary, but it's always a bonus. Some tips I want to give, those are more personal, I would say, is starting early and don't procrastinate. I know it's really hard, and I procrastinated my application, but it's a very important step, I would say. Applying to grad school is a very long and tiring process, just talking from my personal experience. So starting early is very important. That's why I put it on the top. Also, be honest with yourself. Usually, universities are pretty straightforward when they talk about their requirements. And if you don't really need their requirements, like minimum requirements, I would say, why waste your time applying? It's kind of like, it's up to you, but I would put more effort in the university that you know you have a chance to get in. Also, define your research interests. That's, I would say, a very important part. So you don't want to be too broad about your research interests as well. You need to consider your goals. Many students are initially interested in pursuing PhD because they want to become a professor. I don't know if that's your goal, but you may not know that landing a tenure track faculty job is very competitive. So if you don't want to be a professor as your ultimate goal, then maybe consider applying for master's, which is a little easier to apply and a little easier to get into. Also, make sure that your research interests and goals line up closely with those of the program and your future mentor or mentors. So you need to read through their publications, read through what their research group is interested in. You don't want to state that you want to work with that professor and your research interests don't align with them, because that will just not make sense. So be sure that you really have a deep research about certain faculty members of your department. Also, when you look at the faculty members, make sure they publish papers in the recent 5 years at least, because if they're not publishing much or they're not publishing with their graduate students, that's a big red flag for you. Because yeah, having a very well-known advisor is really good for you because of their network. But also, if they are not going to mentor you or help you throughout the way, that's a very hard path you're going to take. So I would say make sure you complete a very deep research about certain faculty members. Also, look for openings. On their website, usually they post if they have openings for the coming year. And if they don't post it, they might still have it. So emailing them is a way to find out. It's also kind of a red flag if they don't say they are hiring. And sometimes they actually state that they're not hiring. And that's also a big red flag. If they say that they're not hiring any grad students, that means they're not hiring because they don't have funding for them, or they don't want to hire anyone because they have too many people in their lab. And I would say that's a no-go for that faculty member. Also, a lot of people suggest to apply broadly, but I would say be cautious when you do so, because you really want to put a lot of effort in the application of the university you really want to get into. And if you apply broadly, it kind of spreads out your attention to the schools that are not very important for you or you don't want to be at. And it's a significant part of your life, like 4 or 5 years spending in a certain place that you don't like. I think it's a waste of time. Personally, be sure that you're really cautious when you apply to a lot of schools. Also, it's kind of expensive because you need to send application fees and GRE scores and all that stuff. Also, check up on your finance, I would say. Look at sample statements from graduate students in your field and ask for feedback from relevant people. So I showed my personal statement, but it's more relevant to people who are applying in science and engineering. So I would say definitely try to look at different samples from students that are admitted into PhD or master's program from your field, and maybe ask feedback from them and ask questions. It's always good to connect with current graduate students. And the last part is kind of just encouraging. Even Albert Einstein's initial application for a doctor was rejected. So a lot of people actually get rejected not because their application wasn't strong or something was wrong within the application. It's mostly because they just don't have openings in a lot of different labs this year, because not a lot of people graduated, but maybe next semester, a lot of people will graduate and they will have many openings. That happens a lot, actually. And I would just say, if you didn't get accepted into your dream or top choices, I would say try applying for following term as well, because you never know. And there are a lot of actually success stories of people reapplying for PhD especially and getting admitted. Then I kind of just stated some jokes for you to read. And here is just kind of a timeline, a very standard timeline, I would say. The point of this is just basically telling you that you need to start early, 12 months before. I would say start studying for GRE and TOEFL, maybe earlier for some people, depending on your situation, and start registering, because places for TOEFL I know fills up really fast. I'm not sure about GRE, but maybe. So don't procrastinate and register early. And then also start studying really early and give yourself a mock test. That's very important. I know it sounds really boring and tiring, and the exam is really long, but having a mock test will kind of give you the perspective where you are in the score range, and it will show you how much you need to work. 6 months before, I would say start working on your application parts. especially SOP, which is statement of purpose. That is very important, and start reaching out to your recommenders. Push them to write your recommendation letter. Sometimes they will need to correct it. Having it prepared early is very important because you don't want to be late with your applications. Like those part of applications are usually not accepted late. So make sure they're all ready by the deadline of the university. And usually deadlines are pretty early for high-rated schools, like December and January are very standard deadlines for fall semester application cycle. And 3 months before you start your grad school, you will receive the decisions, and they will actually state a deadline by what time you need to accept the offer. Make sure you follow those deadlines as well. That is very important. And consult with your peers or somebody else about what school to choose. If you have different options, that is great. And then you'll start your grad school, hopefully. Next part is tuition, stipend, and living costs, which is a very important part when you're actually trying to decide, even before getting the admission offer, I would say, because first of all, you really need to see where the school is located, because if it's in the city, the rent cost, all those different expenses, of course, are going to be higher. Also, depending on the state, like taxes are going to be higher or lower. So that is very important part. Usually for PhD students, tuition is covered, but there are some hidden fees in any school, I would say. So make sure you know about them. They usually are very open about them. They stated on the website what part of the assistantship, what part of the tuition assistantship covers. Usually you will just need to pay for some part of the insurance sometimes. Make sure you know all the details about your specific program. Talking about how I received the assistantship, I got considered for the assistantship automatically. So some universities actually state that when you apply, that you will be considered to different assistantships automatically, and if you get admitted, you will 100% get an assistantship, or there's a 50% chance. So it all depends on what program you're applying to. So I would say for engineering and science, usually you will get a full assistantship. Basically, sometimes it will be teaching assistants, which requires you to teach, or research assistants, which will require you to do research, which is perfect because you still it's kind of aligns with PhD curriculum. That's what I have currently. What you can also do if you want to have teaching experience, you may talk to your advisor, and they can switch you to 50% research assistant and 50% teaching assistant. So when you apply, it's up to your department what they give you. But after your application, and if you join a certain research lab, it's up to your advisor how your assistantship is working. Some graduate schools may ask students to obtain fellowship. Fellowship is kind of just like another type of assistantship. There is no strings attached in terms of career obligations. So basically, it's kind of like a scholarship. You just get awarded that money. You don't really have to do anything. It's just for your achievement. Then usually sometimes fellowships are given throughout your years in grad school. So you like show exceptional research work and you get a certain fellowship for that, which is also really great. And you can find it on the website as well. They state how many students usually get fellowships and what kind of fellowships they are. And also take advantage of your supervisor research grants if you're a PhD student. If you're a master's student, there's still a chance for you to get assistantship depending on what university you go to. A lot of my friends that are doing masters here are obtaining teaching assistantship, which gives them free tuition as well. That all depends on the program. That's why I highly recommend really doing in-depth research of a specific department you're applying to. I talked a lot about like application and stuff, and I kind of wanted to talk a little about my first year in graduate school as a PhD student. There are a lot of different jokes here, but I would say this is very really true. I really relate to this, but it's also a lot of fun. Not gonna lie, you meet a lot of people. You do. That's why being passionate about what you're doing is really important in grad school, because if you really don't like research that you're doing or studies that you're doing, it's going to be a miserable life. This, I would say, a very important advice. I hear it from everyone, and anyone you talk to that is enrolled in PhD program or even masters with like focus on research is really look for an advisor who's kind, than brilliant, because, and you will know that mostly by talking to them or seeing how their students' feedback. So I was fortunate. My program allowed me to choose my advisor for the first 1 month. So I had 1 month when I arrived here to talk to different professors and to talk to their grad students to decide which lab I want to join. And some universities will not allow you. They will just assign you to the professor, which is unfortunate. That's why I say do a really depth research about that. But most of the programs would allow you to transfer or be flexible with it. So I would say definitely try to look for an advisor that is kind and that is actually going to mentor you, because as a joke, kind folks are usually the most brilliant, and I definitely agree with that. Thank you for your attention. If you have any further questions after the presentation and after the questions that are asked right now, you can always contact me on my email. I'm very responsive, and I know this process is really hard and stressful, and I received a lot of help, so I'm really willing to help people in their path of applying for grad school. I didn't apply for fellowship separately from the main application. It depends on the program. It will be written on the website if you're automatically considered for TA-ship and RA-ship. Usually you are, because the department usually generates the funding for them. So those are called assistantships. Usually fellowships are kind of scholarships, but they're not TA-ship or RA-ship. For those, you need to apply separately, but it will be written on the website. I didn't apply personally for any fellowship, and I just got considered for TA-ship and RA-ship automatically when I applied to PhD. For PhD. For masters, it can be a little different though. So that's why usually applying for PhD is a little safer in terms of finance part, because usually you receive financial assistantship in any ways, at least for the most of the universities. Я не обучаюсь на платной основе, у меня есть assistantship, и получается все равно как бы вам приходит bill на tuition, на всякие fees, которые university is giving to you. Part of the assistantship covers certain tuition parts, и это будет говориться в вашем письме, какие именно определенные parts, часть будут оплачены за счет университета, то есть в основном это tuition, insurance и какие-то там book fees и так далее. Но, например, у меня в университете есть transportation fees, fitness fee, activities fees, но они не такие большие. То есть в среднем, я бы сказала, я за семестр оплачиваю со своего кармана за 6 месяцев где-то около $400 за каждый семестр. И, конечно, rent и так далее, это все выходит с вашего кармана. Но все зависит от вашего как бы письма. Если ваш департамент готов оплачивать больше каких-то физ, то это вообще супер. Но я о таком, если честно, не слышала. Assistantship is enough for me to cover all living costs, but that's all depends on your living costs and where you're living. Because the University of Illinois is located in a very small college town, so it's very easy to manage money in terms of paying for rent and like other types of expenses. If you're living in a big city, of course, if your assistantship is really small, that can affect your coverage for living costs. Between TOEFL and IELTS, honestly, it depends on what test you prefer. And some universities need to be careful. Some universities don't accept IELTS in the States recently. So you need to make sure that your department is okay with you taking IELTS over TOEFL. I never took IELTS personally. I just took TOEFL. It honestly all depends on what is easier for you and what your department prefers. I would say it would be safer to take TOEFL if you're applying to a lot of different schools, because I know personally some schools don't accept IELTS since like certain year. How important is to have a publication in research journals? It is a very huge benefit if you do, especially if it's a good impact factor research journal. If you don't, that's also okay, but then you have to stand out in other parts of application. So it's always like balancing, I guess. If you really don't have a very good research experience, you should have some good experience in working, or you have to have outstanding GRE scores or amazing statement of purpose. Make sure your application stands out as much as it can. In your opinion, what makes an application stand out from the crowd when applying to top schools as MIT and Stanford? It's hard to tell. I would say your application should be very strong in any parts or aspects. So having publications definitely going to help. Also, having really good recommendations, I would say, really helps as well. Also, in research area, it's all about networking. Having good network, or maybe like if your recommender personally have a good connection with the faculty from Stanford or MIT would help as well. If you don't have it, I know it's hard to have. So I would say like maybe having some really outstanding research experience or some kind of like participation in science fairs or some kind of like meetings in your field would really help. So when you apply to MIT or Stanford or top schools, as I emphasized a lot, make sure the lab that you're applying to have openings, because those schools are very specific. So if they cannot place you with a certain research lab, they're not going to accept you, even if you're an outstanding student. Or they might accept you, which is even worse. They accept you, and then the lab that you're interested in has no openings, and then you just stay there just doing nothing, and you withdraw, and they might drop you to masters. They can do that as well. So make sure that the professors you're looking in MIT or Stanford actually have openings. I know the name of the school is very attractive, but also having that connection to the research faculty is very important. So how many credits I've earned in the first year of my study? It depends. So I took in total 6 courses. Some of them were 3 credits, some of them were 4 credits, but I also was taking some required seminars, which are 1 credit each. So in average, it was like 12 to 13 credits per semester, I would say. But it really depends on you. You don't have to overload yourself that much, especially if you hold a research assistantship position. You really don't want to taking that time away by studying from your research because your advisor might not encourage that. Did I have any research publications before applying to PhD? Yes, I did. I had 2 publications. Honestly, they were not really relevant to the research I'm doing right now and to the lab I applied to and to the lab I'm part of. That's the thing. Like any research experience is a good experience, I would say, because you develop some really important skills that people are looking in grad students. So definitely listing any research experience or publications you have is very important. But yeah, I had 2 publications before I applied. How much is the application fee in average? That very depends on school, but usually an average is like $205, I would say, but it may vary. Also, you can receive an application fee waiver, different things like that. Really depends on university. So because I directly applied, I don't have masters. I directly applied from bachelor's to PhD. It will on average take me 5 to 6 years at least. But some people take longer. It all depends on your research, because PhD is not just like your requirements of like, oh, I passed the certain classes and I get my PhD. It's your qualification exams, it's your preliminary examination, it's your all those different things that are part of your PhD that determines when you graduate, and also your research. And with science, at least, it's very hard to predict how your research is going to go. For example, your experiment didn't work out and you have to wait another 6 months to get a good data. You will wait another 6 months. They're not going to let you graduate with an average kind of thesis. They want to have a very decent publication, at least in a good schools, I would say. So in my program, like right now, I see people doing PhD for 7 years, but there are people who did it in 4 years. So it really depends on your research, on your PI, on your pace, and I guess a lot of different factors. But on average, I would say 5 years is pretty standard. Did you have an interview after the application submission? No, I didn't. My University of Illinois, I didn't. So with Rice University, I did. So it really depends on the department and how many people they admit and what is their requirement and standard process. University of Illinois didn't require any interview, but some universities might, and I had 2 interviews from Rice and from Brown, and both of them were pretty standard. Basically, what they want you to talk about is your research interests and just getting to know you more personal. And I guess it's their way of seeing how honest you were with your applications. For actual interview, I would really read through your personal statement to make sure you're really say the same thing and show that you actually written it, and not just like copied it from somewhere or something like that. But interviews are usually pretty easy, and once you get to the interview stage, I would say it's a pretty good sign for your up. But if you don't get interviews, don't be discouraged. A lot of universities don't hold interviews, especially if they admit a lot of students. They just don't have time for that. So I would not be upset if I don't get an interview. How long do they consider application package? It depends on the school again. Usually once you like go on their website and read application deadlines, they usually list within what period they're gonna let you know if you're accepted or not. But very standard is usually end of March, beginning of April, because a lot of universities require you to respond by 1st of May if you're accepting the offer or not. And this is for fall semester. So for spring semester, I don't really know the deadlines, to be honest, because I never applied for spring. But usually within like 2 or 3 months period, they're gonna let you know if you got accepted or not. Do we apply directly to the university or through some system in US? You apply directly to the university. So if you go on the website of university of your interest and you click on graduate school, and like depending on if you're applying for master's or PhD, they're gonna have a different link maybe, or combined link. I'm not sure, depends on the university, but it's on their website. Some, for example, UC colleges like University of California, Los Angeles, University of California, Berkeley, UC Davis, like all those combined in one system. But you don't have to know it ahead of the time. It's going to be on their website. So for example, when I applied to Brown, I also wanted to apply to Cornell. And when I tried to log in through Cornell website, it showed me that I can submit Cornell application through Brown website. So like sometimes universities, like some universities are under the same system. So you submit application through the same system, but you really will know that once you go on their website. So there's no like common application website that you fill it out in US. And sometimes you get lucky enough that a lot of your universities that you're interested in are under the same system, and you don't have to fill out like general application parts again, but you always will have to as a resubmit like GRE scores separately, your statement of purpose separately, and you should submit it separately because as I told before in my presentation, your last paragraph is going to state why this university is very unique for you. And you don't want to like submit it to, for example, Cornell stating that Brown is so perfect for you. So you definitely will have some parts of the application that are not going to be sent to the same university.